Hello, ineffable being. How are you doing? Hope you're having a wonderful, magical day. I want to tell you that you are a genius, you are special, you mean the world, and you are loved. Ineffable family, today we're going to talk about the science of loving yourself. We're going to kind of continue last week's topic, and we're going to pick up on the last item from last week. So last week we shared 4 points of how to love yourself. The first one was focus on your emotions. Then get beyond the analytical mind. The third one is getting beyond the past and the future. And the last one is being pragmatic. So today's topic is going to be very important, very powerful, because we're going to see that loving yourself isn't some hippie mumbo jumbo nonsense. A lot of us think of self-love as something that is taboo. Think of self-love as something that we cannot attain. We think it is more of a dream, something that is not a reality for many of us. We believe that self-love is something for people living in the mountains that are bearded and have long hair and perhaps dressed in robes, but not for the average human being. So this is the problem with self-love. And in my journey, I see that the most important is that there are literal things. There are mechanistic steps that we can take to loving ourselves and at least beginning that journey because it is a journey. So self-love, again, isn't for the man that's celibate or the individual who has renounced all the worldly possessions. Self-love isn't for someone up in the mountains or for a guru, a mystic. Self-love is something for a modern man, and it doesn't matter your status in the society or your age, but self-love is a reality for all of us. And my focus is how to take something that can be rather complex for some of us, like living through the heart, and explain it in literal terms. So along my journey, I have wanted to bring into unit my left brain with my right brain. So the left being all the logical, analytically understanding things with reason and logic, and the right brain, the more spiritual, the creative, the emotional brain, right? So that's why every single day I'm waking up and reading about neuroendocrinology, epigenetics, neuroplasticity, neurogenesis. And today I'm going to share with you just a couple of these powerful terms, neuroscientific terms, that I use every day that really validate what it means to love yourself. And that's what I'd like to share with you today. So we start with desire. We have the desire to become a better version of ourselves. We have a desire to overcome the trauma of past experiences, of our anxieties. We want to be powerful. We want to have happiness. We want to find love in our life. So this desire needs to be transmuted into action. And I call this internal action, which we can understand as consciousness. So I can sit here and have my external world remind me of past traumatic experiences, and in the present moment, I can suffer these experiences 10 times over. Or I can sit here in the present moment and be stressed out and be anxious of a future that has yet not occurred. So having the desire to transmute, having the desire to have self-love, to overcome traumas, anxieties, fears, is really fundamental into creating the life that we want. And learning how to transmute this desire into action, internal action, that equals conscious action, is very paramount. So we begin with teasing and playing with Hebb's theory, cell assembly theory. So theory claims that an increase in synaptic efficacy arises from a presynaptic cell's persistent and constant stimulation of a postsynaptic cell. It is customary to be summarized as neurons that fire together, wire together, meaning that if you have sustainable thought patterns for a long time, or you do something time and time again, the neurons in your brain tend to strengthen that learning pattern into a learned behavior, namely a habit. So Donald Hebb wrote this book, The Organization of Behavior, in 1949. This is where Hebb's theory, Hebb's law, cell assembly theory comes from. So in layman terms, what we see is whenever we begin to transmute this desire, what are we doing? Well, I can't just sit here and do the same thing I did yesterday because surely enough, I'm going to have the same reality. So whenever we begin to create new actions, new thoughts, imagine differently, and create different actions, we are evoking this law into our life. Hebb's theory is the catalyst for the next term, neurogenesis. Neurogenesis is the brain's ability to create new neurons. So what we see here is whenever we're creating new thoughts, new actions, we are the catalyst for neurogenesis because now my brain has to create new neurons based on the new experiences that I am creating in my life. And this is, in simple terms, what neurogenesis is. So let's say that we're working on self-love again, and we start reading, we start perhaps meditating, hanging out with people that are pro our life, pro our dreams. We are inciting and paving a new road. And this is neurogenesis. The moment you start to transmute and create different actions, different thoughts, you're paving new neurological networks in your brain. And this is when we get into the third term that I'd like to share with you, which is neuroplasticity. The brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout life. So neuroplasticity and neurogenesis are very closely related. So let me break these down for you just a little bit further. Let's think about a single seed. Okay? We plant this seed in good soil, and there's not another plant or anything around it, but we plant this single seed, which is a single neuron. Well, what's going to happen? In time, this single seed is going to populate, right? We have pollination, and what's going to happen? Underneath the soil, we're going to have this expansive cell network of roots. And this is where we get into the neuroplasticity. The single seed is now going to create new roots and is going to sprout for new plants. So the single neuron that you started to implement into your life, this new action, these new thoughts, these new behaviors are going to create neuroplasticity. In other words, you're going to create a new neurological network in your brain. So let's say that you want to self-love and you begin this process and you begin to read books. Well, this is the single seed. Well, whenever you begin to read on a daily basis, science shows that there's other aspects of the brain that better our vocabulary, our grammatical analytic understanding. So we see that a single action can lead to multiple reactions in the brain, and this is represented in science with neuroplasticity. So we begin to work on ourselves. This is creating new neurological connections because we have created new neurons. Well, let's understand what is going on under the hood. Let's understand these couple of topics. So what is really going on whenever we are the catalyst for neurogenesis, the catalyst for neuroplasticity? Well, in layman's terms, we are creating a new a new neurochemical cocktail. So whenever we're feeling upset, there are certain chemicals in our body that our endocrine gland is releasing. And then now I hear the thought, I am anxious, I am upset. So we can say that our brain follows our body. So we have all these chemicals that used to be created or impacted by our external world. But now we're waking up. We're wanting to take charge of what's going on in our interior by, again, creating conscious action. And this conscious action leads to neuroplasticity, neurogenesis. Well, if you're trying to love yourself and you're working wholeheartedly and you have determined that you are going to work towards self-love, well, surely in some time down the road, you're going to create some new chemicals. So the most widely known chemical of this self-love is oxytocin, right? The love chemical. But we have a couple less known chemicals like phenolines, which is responsible for creating antioxidant effects, such as anti-aging, anti-cancer, anti-heart disease, antimicrobial, and anti-neurodegenerative. All because you decide to wake up within yourself. You decide that self-love is for you, and you're going to take charge of this. And these little things that you do, meditating, prayer, affirmations, reading books that are going to help you, probably talking to a psychologist, trying to overcome your trauma. All of these actions that seem like it is meaningless is actually creating long-term effect in your interior. So another one is benzodiazepines. What are benzodiazepines? This is the formula, same chemical formula found in Valium, that suppresses the activity in the amygdala, the brain's survival center. This is going to be very important whenever we get into the last point that I'm going to share with you. But all these neurochemicals, the importance of me sharing this with you is that I want you to understand that there is a fundamental change happening inside of you. Whenever you begin to speak up for yourself, whenever you say, you know what, I had a long day today, but I love myself, and I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to try harder. A lot of us, we look at, gurus and mystics talking about self-love, but it's hard to identify with them because I'm in America or I'm in, England or wherever you may be, you have a corporate job or you're working to be a CEO of a company and you can't see yourself adopting the principles and the teachings of these people that are so bearded with long hair and in robes because you don't see a correlation. But once we start to understand that there's a lot of science behind self-love, then perhaps we begin to create cohesion in the left and right hemisphere and makes this process a tad bit easier to accept. So now, to drive in this point of self-love, I want to share with you a couple last terms. And this is the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. So these make up the autonomic nervous system, which controls all the automatic processes of our body, of our nervous system. So whenever you begin to work on self-love, you are beginning to regulate this autonomic nervous system. So let's talk about a deer. So a deer, it's feeding, it's grazing, it's in peace. It is in the parasympathetic nervous system. But then a predator begins to chase it and attack it. Well, what's going to happen? Well, its sympathetic nervous system that is responsible for our flight or fight response kicks in. So all the blood rushes to the muscles, rushes to the extremities. Your attention is focused on survival, right? So it escapes, it runs away, and it goes back to grazing, and it naturally goes back to the parasympathetic nervous system that is responsible for rest and digestion, anabolism, tissue repair, all of these things. So whenever we, the human being, which are a much more advanced animal species than a deer, for example, we don't know how to consciously regulate this dance because it is a dance. The parasympathetic nervous system kicks in after the sympathetic nervous system. But the problem is we have traffic. We have my Wi-Fi isn't working. My Keurig, oh, I don't have a new coffee to put in my Keurig. And all of these things, our day-to-day, our siblings, our partners, my phone just cracked. All of these fire off neurons that result in stress. So whenever we're living in stress, we're living through our sympathetic nervous system. And learning how to regulate this dance is what it means to love yourself. Then we get into the placebo effect. The placebo effect is healing that comes from the patient's belief in the treatment. So this is so important, and I love to look at this every single day, and that's why I read about it every single day. What we're seeing here is how is a person overcoming depression, overcoming type 1 diabetes, overcoming Tay-Sachs disease, overcoming these things if there isn't a drug in this pill? How is this person overcoming their illness with this false surgery? Well, in simple terms, the body has these chemicals, and because the brain, which controls the nervous system, believes in this treatment, it releases those chemicals because they already exist. Your endocrine system can create any experience that you ask of it. What I look at whenever I look at the placebo is, do I need the placebo or can I make the decision to do it consciously? And lastly, to tie the bow on all of this self-love and science, let's talk about epigenetics. Epi means above the genes. Many years ago, after the DNA helix was discovered by Watson and Crick, we said genes are the blueprints to our life, to all illness. So it turns out less than 5%, more like 1% of the people on the planet are born with a genetic condition like type 1 diabetes, metastases, or sickle cell anemia. The other 95 to 99% are created by lifestyle and by choices. You can have two identical twins with the exact same genes. One dies at 50, the other dies at 80. So, same gene, different environment. All of a sudden, they say we lied. It's not the gene that creates disease, it's the environment that signals the gene that creates disease. Okay, but that's not the whole truth either, because you can have two people working side by side in the same factory. One gets cancer after being exposed to a carcinogenic for 25 years, the other has no cancer at all. So there must be some internal order that would cause one person to get it while another doesn't. So this is very important because we often think about our environment as our external world. But that's not the only thing that is influencing us. We also have our interior. So what epigenetics is revealing to us is if we can learn to create an elevated emotion ahead of the environment, aka creating love, happiness, joy, can we change the environment that our genes are responding to? The answer is absolutely yes. Dr. Joe Dispenza has done phenomenal research and substantial research in this realm of epigenetics. He did an advanced workshop with individuals for 4 days. He had them doing a seated meditation, a standing meditation, a walking meditation, a lying down meditation. And at the end of 4 days, just 4 days, we begin to see drastic improvements in their genetic expression. 2 genes were upregulated to suppress cancer cells and tumor growth. 2 genes for neurogenesis, the growth of new neurons in response to novel experience and learning. 2 genes for oxidative stress was upregulated. So we start seeing all of these genes that cause the body to flourish. Imagine if people were doing this for 6 months. We also measured telomeres, the little shoestrings on the end of DNA that tell us our biological age. So we asked people to do the work, meditation, 5 out of 7 days for 60 days. Measure the telomeres that determine their biological age. 60 days later, 70% of the people lengthened their telomeres, 40% significant change, 20% very remarkable change. If they lengthened the telomeres by 10%, this means they got 10% of their life back. So, in conclusion, Ineffable Bane, I know I just shared a lot of information with you, so I invite you to go back, watch this video again. But if you take anything from this video, is to understand that self-love and happiness is something that is available to you. It's not just for gurus, it's not for mystics, it's not for the Buddha, it's not for Shiva, it's not only for Jesus Christ. It is for everyday people like you and me. If you have the desire to overcome the past and be freed from the future, if you have the desire to become your best version and to love yourself, then look at this video every single day. And look at this, analyze that. There's a lot of science backing self-love. There's as much science as there is in self-love as there is in the study of sex, drugs, sadness, and the anatomy of all the animals in the world. But the question is, where are you putting your focus on? I understand. You want to be happy. You want a loving life. You want a loving partner. And you want to love yourself. But what steps are you taking? What information are you consuming that is going to help you in that journey? Because the music we listen to, the movies that we watch from Hollywood films, this information isn't going to give you the data that we need. Not that there's anything wrong with the music that you listen to or with the movies that you watch, because I listen to rap. My favorite artist is Drake, and I love Transformers, and I love Vikings. But if you want to go into the journey of self-love, then you are going to have to invest a little bit of time. And looking at the science behind what consciousness is, it demystifies this journey of self-love. Ineffable family, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please put down in the comments, did you receive value from this video? And if you did not receive value, please also share that with me down in the comments. And lastly, please share what topics you'd like for me to cover in the future. I hope to see you next week in the Side of Light. Goodbye.